Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Louisa Medland, I'm the Wash Resilience Coordinator at Oxfam here in the UK, and I'll be moderating the discussion today. So I'll just do some very quick introductions. Thank you for typing who you are and where you work and where you're based in the chat box. Please continue to do so. It's nice to have this global network. There are 39 of us online at the moment, which is fantastic considering some people it's very early, some people it's very late, but that's the beauty of a global network. So we've got 3 presenters, we hope, today. We're still waiting for one. But first of all, we have Louisa Gosling. She is the Quality Programme Manager for WaterAid, and her particular focus is on promoting awareness on the critical importance of access to wash in realising the human rights of people who are marginalised. And then after that, we'll have Akramul. He is the Director of WASH for BRAC, which is the world's largest development organisation, working in 11 countries, and he's been with BRAC since 1993, so I'm sure he has a wealth of knowledge to share with us. So as Esther said, if you could just all mute your microphones before we kick off, that would be great. Please hold any questions, any spoken questions, until after the presenters have finished. You can feel free to type them in the text box as the presenters are speaking, and then we'll get to them all as part of the plenary discussion. Don't be afraid to be a bit controversial as well. I'm just throwing that one out there. So, Louisa, over to you, and I look forward to everything you've got to say.
Thank you very much, Louise and Sarah and Esther, for inviting me to this webinar, which I think will be really interesting. Could you put the slides up that I was going to show? I'm just going to present for 5 minutes very briefly about some work that I've been doing with the other organisations shown here on this slide on making human rights real in a way that makes sense for local government officials. Local government officials are really important, as they are usually the people responsible for actual service delivery, and also they're the government unit closest to the people. So our aim here was to really make human rights, but often human rights seem very abstract and not very relevant to people in government, or they feel rather threatened by the idea of human rights. So our aim was to try and understand how to make them more useful. We started off by doing some research. We did the kind of research that marketing agencies do to understand their audience in order to better aim their product or communication material at the market. So we did in-depth interviews with a number of people in either working with local government, or who work in civil society organisations who work very closely with local government. And these were some of the challenges that were highlighted in those interviews, and I think many people on this call will be familiar with these in relation to sanitation. Actually, we were asking about water and sanitation, but these are certainly very relevant for sanitation. So, for example, decisions that were made about investment on facilities, where we asked them what influences your decisions, and the biggest thing was the political interference and corruption. There was huge problems of a lack of human resource and skills, lack of legal framework and policy direction, and so on. What we wanted, the reason for doing this, was to understand what are the challenges that people were experiencing in their day-to-day life, so that when we were talking to local government about human rights and obligations, they're not being, it's understanding what are the constraints and the reality of their position. So we then used this survey information with a communications agency. So this is an agency that specialises in how to communicate to different audiences. And what they do is they create what's called personas. So you can see here that they use the data from the interviews that we've carried out to find 4 general types of people. So there are the superheroes who, despite all obstacles, do a great job at improving water and sanitation services. And I think probably anyone working in the sector knows some of those people working in local government, in spite of all the troubles, difficulties, really making a difference. Then we found the would-be heroes, who there's quite a lot of would-be heroes. These are people who want to do the right thing, but feel very constrained and often very vulnerable in their role, and so feel unable to really act out on their superhero aspirations. The next one is the laggard. So this, again, probably most people in any organisation are familiar with people who are really more hesitant about stepping outside. They don't really want to take responsibility, but will stay within the constraints of what they really have to do, they only follow the rules, and they don't really want any trouble. And then finally, the persistent objector is somebody who will actively resist change and will often make it difficult to have change. So I don't know if these people are familiar to you. So most organisations and governments in all countries have a mixture of these people. But so what we thought is that we would, if we're trying to, like, those organisations working with local government should really that can focus on the would-be hero, because the actual superheroes are already doing a lot, but there are quite a lot of would-be heroes sitting on the sidelines who, with the right kind of encouragement and support, may be able to move into that real superhero space to make more of a difference. And so to think more closely about how to work with these people, we looked as well at what kind of influences there are between these people and also the relationships of sector partners with these would-be superheroes, or with local government generally. So you can see here that the sector partners, so organisations like WaterAid, work closely with the local government and can have some influence on them through training and all the sorts of activities we do. At the same time, they are being influenced by communities, and particularly active groups within communities. They are very much influenced by national policies and programs and the structures and hierarchies within which they work. That was very clear in the interviews. They can't do anything that does not conform with government policy and priorities. Media can also have a big influence. Having good stories or bad stories about performance can be really important. And then the role of politicians and elders and role models and religious leaders is incredibly important, has a very big influence on the individuals who are at this local level of government. And then finally we have the regulators. So this is the kind of the official formats and bodies who are trying to influence what the local government, what services are provided and what's the standard. So these are the people that we wanted to target with our information about human rights. And very sort of quickly, these are some of the materials that we've produced. So it's a sort of, this is human rights to water and sanitation, written specifically for people who are in this local government position. So you can see here we've tried to outline what are the benefits to that speak to what people want in terms of being a hero, how their relationships with others can increase, they get better coordination with others in the sector, and also they're generally seen to be more active and successful. And so there's a short piece of and a longer manual, which is all of 5 pages, and the journey, which I can go into in more detail later. I don't want to take up too much time now, but the material is here on the website, Right to Water Info, Making Rights Real. But I just wanted to also very quickly add that this focus on incentives and the how important it is to understand what incentives works at different levels and for different people has been found to be incredibly critical in sanitation. So my colleague Andres Hueso in WaterAid has done research about turning political will into a reality and how that translates at different levels. So I'm just going to stop there for the other presenters, but I look forward to more discussions about this. So thank you.
was really wonderful. Thank you very much, Louisa. Yeah, I have loads of my own questions, but that's not fair as a moderator to steal all the time. Hopefully you're making a note of any questions you want to ask, either in person or in the chat box. We'll move on to Akramul from BRAC.
Okay, so I don't have that slide with me, but I'd like to present introduce a few thoughts. In Bangladesh, particularly in the BRAC, we work quite a lot on the wash, and almost half of the sub-districts in the rural areas we covered about in 10 years, and with the population of more than 65 million people. So that's a huge coverage we did it in Bangladesh in the wash sector. Nearly more than 50,000 wash committee, we call it village wash committee. This committee around 11 members, and half of them are women and half of them are men. So in every villages we created this as a platform in the community. And this committee, particularly that they identify the needs of the villagers through the participatory rural appraisal. So they know what the needs in the society in the water and sanitation perspective. So then they do a mapping, and then they start discussions with the community who can really build their own latrines, and also to use improve their own tube wells of the latrines. So they basically make a local level planning and also solve by themselves at first. But there are many people who are really poor, who cannot afford, then they identify those people who will be who need really support, external supports, and they map it, and then they are listed it. So this is the one way we basically identify the problems at the ground level and who really needs supports. So when we're working with the government, particularly the local government, then with this list, basically we participate in the local working committee with the sub-district level and the union level, and give this list to the local government. The local government has also the financial mechanism that they give it easily extreme poor, who doesn't have latrines. When they are, so they really like to give support, but one of the key problems of the local government is selecting the extreme poor people or poor people who really need support. So that's one of the big troubles the local government faces. And in this place is BRAC in the right place to support the local government with the data of the poor people, and then discuss with the local government to influence them in decision making of the selecting the extreme poor. So in this, as a tools of selecting the right people with the local government to utilize the government resources that government allocate for each sub-district, we propose then two issues. One, we propose in the list. And the second thing, that if government has some funding, then we can do a matching funding support to the extreme poor. And this way, basically, we influence the government to a local level decision making who really gets the government support or not. So that's the way, listing them and offering them the half of the support that will come from the BRAC, the rest half can be given by the local government. So there's a way basically governments motivated and mobilize their political will, and also a listing of the local people. So it's one of the ways that we really work with the local government and engage them in mobilizing more resources from the public sectors. Second way, we went there and in governments in terms of the other stuff, central level, this wash and steering committee, which is headed by the minister of the local government. And then this minister of the local government, we heavily participates and also present the good practices and the good results in the central level. So with this information that we come from these villages in sub-district, district, we present to the local government. And in the local government, basically, what they do is that again go back to each of this database in the local through their own district council and the sub-district council, and they verified it. And in most of the cases, in the districts we work, the sub-districts we work, we report back to the government, and they find it's absolutely fine in terms of the progress that we made it. So that gives a kind of a confidence to the government on the NGO that NGO can perform good practices in the local areas with the local government, and also can produce the result that's really help the government to reach the MDGs. And that's sort of one of the areas that Bangladesh made progress close to that zero open defecation because of millions of latrines being constructed by the governments, by the local peoples, and with the support of the international development partners and NGOs. So this is two ways that we do it in local level planning, local level policy framing, and also the national level planning. And the example of national level policy planning, another example would like to give it to the school wash. In about 20,000 schools, secondary school in the country, in around 20,000 schools, BRACs almost covered 25%. One quarter of the schools in the wash coverage. And we discussed with the schools management committee that you need separate girls and boys toilets. And then the local government, local school authority agreed on that, and then they built on the left. So we give a part of the money, then the school mobilized part of the money, and then they committed for maintenance of the school. So we then again, more than 5,000 schools, they do similar practices. Then we demonstrate this practice to the local elected body to show them this is possible if the government is willing. This is possible if the school management committee is willing. With these good practices, then government basically decided to a policy change at the national level that every school should have their own facilities for girls and boys first, and then hand washing facilities, improve sanitation, and also the disposal of the menstrual hygiene materials. So that's the kind of way that we show the results and demonstrate results to the policymakers, local politicians, and then are also sharing the national levels. So sharing national information and also feeding the information through the local level representative. That also helps the government to build a case for investment and then evidence generation for that. And nowadays the government, all the newly building constructed in their schools, they have to have the latrines for the boys and girls separately. That's one of the big push we made it because of the numbers we made it, and it's possible to show the impact and demonstrate that part. The third part of the commitment, we are now working on that, which is close to the 35 district towns. And in this phase, we decided that in the district towns, if we like to go in the district towns to influence, then we need to work with the city corporations, Purushabhas, municipalities, and the local government is one of the anchors. So we first built an MOUs, in this phase, signed a contract with them, but the government will build the infrastructure and will work the community for mobilizing the community people. So the community people can use those infrastructure properly, and also maintain what there is a need, like a drainage system. If there is some blockage, the community should work on that particular to maintain those drainages. So in this way, basically, we'll engage with the communities to utilize more resources that's provided by the public sectors and maintain those resources in the community. So we hope that another push will move into the city areas. And as a part of this initiative, we already started fecal flush management in one district towns within the municipality. So municipality gives us the lands and the infrastructure, particularly the management of the fecal flushes, treatment of fecal flushes. So what we do it with the plant was really not non-functional, that we just made functional with the local government, and we prepare a fee structure of the households. So they can pay the fee structure for collecting the fees. And then we're expecting this fees, we will manage this collections and disposal with some revenues, and then we are also planning next step for creating a value chain, particularly for organic fertilizer, and then we'll move for the marketing after testing by the government's body. That's whether there is any pathogens or not. So with these three big push we made it, particularly in the policy areas. Like in other speakers, what really are enabling factors that make it happen? For doing it, we found a number of enabling factors. We found a number of important factors. That one of the factors is that and influencing the local levels, politicians and policymakers, civil society, LAs. So what we did it, we make an advocacy workshop at sub-district and the below level, where we invited local elected bodies, local LAs and school teachers, college teachers. So they came together and discussed on that, so that we can have this workshops have been done throughout the year, throughout the 250 Gujarat and other district towns, so we can give the messages that what is really important or not. The second part of work we did it in the schools. In every school, so we have student breakers. From the schools, students we give a kind of orientation and training to maintenance of the schools. So those schools have been oriented by in the students and the teachers. So that school teachers have also been oriented on the wash net. So they are also part of this advocacy mobilization at the sub-district level. And the third one is mobilizing all of the religious leaders on the wash. So they also been oriented and trained and then participate in this advocacy. The three platforms, basically, elected body with the local elites, education institutes, and the religious institutes. So three platforms basically with that. And for working that, there's a huge chunk of local level support generated for the WASH, and that also helps the local governments or other bodies to perform the duties and responsibilities. And also at the same time, it also works as a watchdog, so that locally they can see where the money is being utilized or not, or where the money is being utilized, is this facilities are being functioning, is the latrines are clean, and people are using or not. So those are the issues basically we did over there. And for the financial mechanism, we started working, we found that in many rural areas, they don't have the construction of the latrine material, so we provide thousands of entrepreneurs locally, and many of them entrepreneurs are the women entrepreneurs. So we give them a loan, soft loans, so they create their own business, and then they can sustain it. So they created thousands of entrepreneurs created throughout the country in the peripheral side that people can easily take the materials from them with the minimum travel cost. Because if they come to towns, they have to put a lot financial loss in terms of travel costs, particularly carrying costs of materials to that, and particularly in the remote side. So we bring them entrepreneurships as close as possible in the local level markets and financing them. At the same time, we also financing opportunity for the people who have been using these materials. There are two issues. One is extreme poor. Extreme poor get some financial subsidy that I already spoke with you from the local government and the BRAC. And also the other people who really like to have financing from any institutions that will generate some finances for institutions like BRAC, microfinance, and the BRAC WASH program. So we do also the financing, and with interest rate, and people are also taking it. And some people, they don't need those financial support. They could use their own savings. So in this way, we create the demand, matching this demand to the public sectors, and then create a platforms of advocacy to utilize more public resources, and also we create the private sector's avenue for sustainability purposes for matching the supply side, as well as some sort of grant support of extreme poor. And sometimes we also influence the policy making for evidence generation, policy framing, and also the new policy agenda. And right now, the government in Bangladesh has been pushing camp closing in a village, and also pushing on the public toilets, particularly in the marketplaces and
the 1 minute warning there.
So that's one of the areas that
yeah,
also we're
quite a lot of detail covered.
Thank you.
So hopefully everyone got that, and we'll have plenty of time for discussion.
Yeah.
Our third presenter, Jack Sim, has arrived.
Okay, so basically I'll just tell you my story is that I'm coming more from influencing the government through very indirect manner. So when we first started, the subject of toilet, sanitation, shit, poop are very unspeakable because it's very, very embarrassing, and everybody calls it water agenda. And when you call it water, you don't mention sanitation. Sometimes they call it Watsan, but very shortly they will just say water. And water is a very, very big subject. It covers drinking water, agricultural water, industrial water, flood, iceberg melting, global warming, bottled water, virtual water, and sewage pipe system. So in all this big agenda, sanitation became buried. So how do we solve this problem is to make toilets very humorous so that the taboo becomes a media darling and everybody starts to laugh at it. And when they're laughing at it, they're actually listening about it. And the media love it so much that they wrote a lot of media coverage, which every year we get about 2 to 3 billion outreach just on World Toilet Day, 19th of November itself. So we have World Toilet Summit, and we created a lot of buzz in the news, and journalists basically are not particularly interested in any subject, but if the subject itself can sell news and can get advertisement and can get eyeballs, that's the news they want. So sanitation as a WTO, World Trade Organization, confused with World Toilet Organization, that really, really sells the news so well. Now, after a while, governments start to pay attention because politicians, they need not be interested in any particular agenda as long as it can make them popular and win votes. So if sanitation gets a lot of attention on media, so will the politician wants to promise toilets. So through creating media legitimacy, the politicians start to become very, very interested in toilets. And as some beginner, early adopter politicians start to promote toilets and win election, others start to copy them, and soon toilet became a very, very hot election winner. So as shown in India, Minister Jairam Ramesh was very popular doing his toilet program, building 32 million toilets, and to beat him, Prime Minister Modi promised 110 million toilets, and right now the Swachh Bharat is in full swing. So what I observe is that if we want to create a project, then that is within the ambit of an NGO. But if we want to create a movement, then that belongs to everyone. So the World Toilet Day belongs to everybody, not belongs to the World Toilet Organization. Although it's our founding day, it belongs to everyone. And per year, WaterAid, UNICEF, everybody celebrates World Toilet Day. The entire 193 countries of the UN General Assembly in 2013 adopted 19 November as the official UN World Toilet Day. So this kind of movement cannot be planned, but it can be very, very large because everybody is involved. So what is the next thing that we must do is that at the local level, when you're building toilet at a very fast pace, even if you have a lot of money to build it, the adoption rate, the usage, the maintenance, the cleanliness might still be a problem if you do not make toilet fashionable. So I would like to call on everybody to make toilet not just a rationally important product, but actually a fashionable lifestyle. So how do you do it? You know, inside Indian village or any African village, the most colorful thing is their clothing. The woman loves to wear very, very colorful batik or saris or whatever clothing, bright colors, and nothing else is colorful inside the village. So if this individualism gives them an identity, why don't we transfer all these colors and designs onto the walls of the toilets? So when toilets become a bragging right, a status symbol, becomes a model of individual identity, it also becomes a jealousy product. And you know, jealousy drives human behavior so quickly because you guys all own some products or Louis Vuitton or Rolex watches, and the whole idea is to buy all these goods to piss off your friends so that they feel that kind of like, oh, I don't have and you have, so I'll go and buy something else to piss you back with a handbag or something. So village dynamics works the same. When I was a child, we were living in a very poor condition. Our houses were coconut thatched roof, and my house has a cement floor, but our neighbor house has a mud floor. That means the floor is the same as the floor outside the house, right? So they were looked down upon by the neighbors, and later on when their children have some money, they made cement floor, but they make colored cement floor. So they bought red powder and put it into the cement, and their cement floor looked nicer than our cement floor, and they pissed us off back, right? So these are very, very important, whether it's flooring or toilets or saris or satellite TV or cell phone or motorcycle. Village dynamics works very powerfully on one-upmanship, just like the city. So if we were to make toilet fashionable, we would be able to get people to change their ownership and behavior and attachment to the toilet, and the toilet will become something that they can show off. And of course, if it's something precious to them, they will maintain it, they'll make sure it's empty, and lifestyle change irrationally faster than rationally. So the other group of people is the academia. They actually publish or they perish. So all these university professors, where if they want to keep their job, they have to do research and publish. And when we are able to offer them the opportunity to publish on all the sanitation research, suddenly all these unsung heroes have an opportunity to rise up and create a lot of this knowledge out there. And SuSanA is one great example, because the members with all the knowledge base and all the universities and all their research suddenly become a platform for knowledge sharing. So the story of SuSanA also started in 2008 when Prime Minister Hashimoto wanted to create the International Year of Sanitation 2008. So in 2007, all of us met in Germany, supposedly to celebrate World Toilet, this International Year of Sanitation 2008. But since we were all there, we decided that we should form a permanent group. And some of us were saying like, what's the point and where's the money and all that. But eventually we realized that there's so much to learn and we want to share together. So SuSanA has been around for so long, and it became another very, very useful knowledge archive that everybody referred to. So things happen as it goes, and as it's unplanned, Matt Damon came along to have a toilet strike, and that is water.org. And again, he promoted World Toilet Day through a very comical sketch, and his friends, Richard Branson and everybody else joined in. This keeps on going until last year in Mumbai on World Toilet Day, 19th of November. Global Citizen organized a big concert for Coldplay, Jay-Z, and it was hosted by Shah Rukh Khan and Vidya Balan and the cricket legend Tendulkar, and a lot of chief ministers, including Prime Minister Modi, appearing at the event for 80,000 free ticket concert. And so this kind of thing is like when you try to create a movement, you do not know who's going to come. You don't have any, these are all unknown outcome. However, if you keep doing it for everybody, suddenly everything rises and all ship rises along the way. And this is an effort not of one or two or 10 entity, but everybody. And this is how movement happen. And I hope everyone can celebrate World Toilet Day this year. Thank you.
So if we can jump back to a question that came up for Louisa from Cecile. Could you give an example of municipalities in which you used the manual on human rights, and what kind of change did it trigger?
Thank you. Yeah, so we've been sharing the manual with different people, and one of the examples was a colleague in Ghana who systematically shared it with a number of people working in government in different districts and so on, and they went through the materials, and their feedback was that they found it really helpful, because I think that especially in countries where there's a lot of talk about human rights and human rights to water and sanitation, there's a lot of sort of fear, and also there are lots of myths about what's expected of the government. Doesn't mean government has to provide everybody with sanitation free of charge, and you know, what are we supposed to do? We don't have any money. What about the communities and so on? So they found the materials very helpful, because they went through, what it does is it goes through the process of kind of understanding the current level of service, what's the planning process, bringing in resources from different development partners, and then also, you know, checking on the quality, supervision and implementing, and then monitoring, and then feeding it back to assessment. So what they found was that, the feedback from the government was that this was really helpful. It made them see what their responsibilities were, what their part was, and it also clarified some of the the important criteria for the human rights, meaning, for example, that services don't have to be free, but they do have to be affordable, and that's where this question of subsidies also comes in that we were hearing from BRAC, and also the sort of focus on equality and non-discrimination, so the responsibility to reach people who have not yet been served. And the principle of participation, what does that actually look like? How can busy government officials, what does this principle of participation look like? At what stages of planning, monitoring, and so on, is it really good to get community feedback? So the feedback from the people who saw the materials was it was really helpful for them, but they also then wanted the more material for the community, so that people in communities also had a clearer understanding about what service looks like under human rights. And then also they wanted to make sure that the elected officials, the district assembly members and so on, also understood their responsibilities. So we've also had colleagues having similar discussions in Burkina Faso, where they have incorporated into their constitution human rights to water and sanitation. So there again, it's really useful for people to have this discussion about what it does mean, what it doesn't mean, what's the responsibility of communities for maintaining services, what about the responsibility of NGOs like BRAC, and just to have those discussions together. So I'll stop there, but if there's any more questions, I'm happy to carry on. And also, I'd just like to say that Hannah Neumeier, who's been taking part in this project, is also on the call here, so she might also want to add something, or if anyone has more questions.
Thanks, that's great. And Cecile said thank you, it's very clear, which is always good. We'll throw one out there to the whole panel. Bearing in mind sort of the human right to water and sanitation, which is often used as both a positive and negative aspect when talking to governments about why they should do water and sanitation provision in their countries, we'd like to ask the question of if that is not enough, if the right to human rights approach can only address so much and go so far, what other approaches have you seen or do you know of or can you think of that might help overcome that gap in commitment or supposed commitment and action? So the whole panel, please.
So I think that the motivation for each of the stakeholders are very different. So if we want to motivate politicians into changing public policy, then the best way is to make them popular. Because if we moralize a problem, sometimes there's no triggers in the moralization. Let's say people should stop smoking. It's a moralization, but okay, it doesn't trigger them to stop smoking, right? But if you kind of like say, when politicians promise toilet, they are good politicians, and then wow, they will want to do that. Or when you have a toilet, you are higher class than your neighbor, then these are the triggers. So if you can provide triggers for each of the stakeholders very differently, for example, the media would like to know a fresh story. So you have to keep this hook very, very fresh, right? If the shit story is very fresh, then they would like it very much. And so although it's the same story, you have to start a new angle and a new headline and a new sacrificial photograph, and you can mix humor with serious facts. And if you watch a film like the 3-minute film called Meet Mr. Toilet, you'll find that inside every 3 seconds there's a serious fact, and then there's like 2 seconds of fun, and then another 3 seconds of serious fact. And if you keep doing it like that, the media, they can sell their news. So you have to solve the problem with incentivization and less on the moralization.
Less on more incentivization and less on moralization. I think that works for so many things that we do. Louisa or Akramul, would you like to step in?
Yeah, I'll step in. So yeah, no, I mean, I agree completely with what Jack says, that you really need different motivation for different stakeholders, and that, you know, sort of moral arguments about human rights definitely are not necessarily the ones that really get the media attention, or the you know, it's not that they're not going to sort of necessarily start the process, but I think that it can help, it can reinforce the kind of the obligation side. So it's one, you know, and I think, for example, in India there's been this huge surge in building toilets and so on, but at the same time there have been problems where people have said they've built toilets and they haven't, or they've built the infrastructure but actually there's no proper toilet inside, and so on. So I think it's also like the kind of the maybe the more serious or a sort of activist focus on what is actually being delivered on the ground helps with the kind of the verification of it, and that the sort of push on what I think what human rights brings is really the focus on accountability, and these different responsibilities. What is the responsibility of the state in order to provide toilets? But I think you need the media attention. You need to make it a really exciting subject as well. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's really different. And again, that's also something that I think Andres Suezo's research sort of really showed, that there are really different aspects to this kind of turning political will into action on the ground, especially when you're trying to reach everybody, including people who are marginalized. So not just the kind of the happy consumers who will go out and buy a nicer toilet than their neighbors, but people maybe living in informal settlements or in really hard to reach areas, or the extreme poor. You know, who's responsible to really make sure those people also have access. So yeah, that's my interjection.
Thanks, and I think that follows on really nicely, because Reza has just put in the comment box that he says, I see a conflict between rights-based and market-based approach, especially when market-based approach is focused on vulnerable people, while the huge service demand among the well-off sections of the society is ignored because it does not fit into the programme modality. So I think this is a great point of discussion that's starting off here, and I think that follows on nicely for what behaviour we're changing, what are we trying to motivate, excuse me, and how do we incentivize that at all the different levels. So we have another really good question that follows on, which is, there we go, it came earlier, so saying, are there any good examples of local government outreach to the people in a situation where there is a NIMBY, not in my backyard issue, especially when we're thinking about sanitation for things like treatment and reuse? Akramul, do you have anything, because you've worked more with local government and communities and the full service chain, do you have anything on that point? I'll copy it into the box again so you can read it.
So what is one of the areas that's, you know, that we find is important, that's we need to work basically at the household level and the institutional level, both levels. So in household levels, rights is a really critical issue. And that's what in our experiences, when we engage the women in the household levels, so we have a better use of the latrines also, not only the installation but a better use, so the women and girls can be used. So it should be start from the household levels, and I do agree on the institutional levels has to also ensure that there will be a clean latrines, for every places, public places that people can use it. And I will agree that one of the critical things is at this point is this compliance issues of the different public places. That needs to be maybe done, and through the media, I do agree with Jack saying that we need to bring the media in attention so that we could have better, compliance in the public places where do we have any good latrines or not, then people can use it. If there is not clean sanitation in the public places, people will not be able to utilize it. But more often that another issue comes in our places, that the awareness raising, because in most of the places we see in managing this, latrines in the public settings are really poor. So that's need to become on the discussion. So in some settings, not in the political but also the institutional level, how could we keep clean these latrines so that people can use it? And of course, another discussions comes in the equity issue, particularly the extreme poor. How should we finance them? Because everybody has the rights to have clean and usable toilets. So maybe there should have some financial, provisions or support provision for extreme poor or people living in slum conditions, or they really need good latrines and sanitation. So these are 3 points on the earlier points. But on the other hand, our question that you send to local government issues and particularly in the NGOs involvement. And I do not find any problem to be engaged local NGOs to be with the local government, because local government and the local NGOs, they're working very closely. But only issue is that how do you engage the local governments to improve their own motivation and commitment for the sanitation? There needs to be some push from the top level. So maybe not always local NGOs could have ability to influence local government to increase the commitment. So there may be some tractions from the central level and then pushed by the media strongly. Thank you.
Do you find any specific problems though with, I suppose, more on the treatment and reuse, as more and more people get access to latrines? Obviously the waste has to go somewhere. So potentially one of the questions that a local government may ask is, but what am I going to do with all this waste because I have nowhere to put it? Have you ever come across anything like that?
In the past, we usually used to do a single pit latrine, but right now we are now two double pit latrines, so that you can have still 2 years time to use this old one, and then you can, when you fill in, you can go to the new one. So what we are now discussing with the local government, this phases, when this is after 2 years, can we use this organic fertilizer? And then we have now started working on that directions, and then thousands of local level household bodies are now preparing, making their organic fertilizers, and we're now testing in the laboratories and pushing to the local level bodies to be approved for using fertilizers. So the discussions, because one of the millions of toilets will go into the field. So that discussions come in, and also we are working on that directions. So when temporary solutions, we're using 2 pits, so that we can have some time and space where people can have latrine use, and then also the pits can be used for fertilizers.
Great, thanks. Jack, do you want to go with your story?
Okay, so I've got a very good example of the how to trigger behavioral change in, I visited Foundation Paraguay in Paraguay, and they created what is called My Toilet, My Prize program, which they put out a $2,000 prize for any group that could show them the worst toilet condition, a photograph, and then the best toilet after it is built. So everybody find the worst toilet in their village, which sometimes is just open defecation, sometimes it's a hole and with some sticks and sex as privacy screens. So everybody use their Facebook account to demonstrate how they transform from a very terrible situation to a very good situation. And how do they do that? That poorest person will get support from her neighbor, and they all chip in. Maybe some will bring bricks, some will bring stones, some will supply sweat equity, labor. And if they win that $2,000, everybody share equally, including the recipient. So they mobilize this, and they get several hundreds of thousands of people building their toilets for the $2,000 prize. So after that, a lot of toilets are built, but only one guy wins in each area. And when I interview one of the group that didn't win, they say, we feel very nice about the process because it created bonding, and we felt that we wanted to help her because she's a single mother with a daughter and she needs the toilet and whatever. It created this community bonding. It created a lot of toilets, and it created a prize. So I think this has no government subsidy, but it also created a behavioral change inside every village through their awareness, and it only costs $2,000. So this kind of thing, I think we should try to use. I'm asking End Water Poverty to work with Foundation Paraguay to create this program. I will be very happy to disseminate this program to everybody in SuSanA as well.
Thank you very much. The easiest way to do that will probably be to put the link in the text box below so everyone can access it. We'll also try to put it in the notes afterwards, which I believe will be on the SuSanA website. So we go back to a question for the whole panel, which is, one way to influence local and national government is to work with them triggering achievable targets which require sustainable capacity of the local government. The SDGs require multi-sectoral development, as they're all interlinked. So multi-sectoral work needs more resources, which are a major concern in many developing countries. And again, capacity needs assessment in developing countries is a prerequisite to be aligned to the SDGs. But many countries like Bangladesh have sector development planned by the government, which it doesn't go far enough to reach the SDGs. It only focuses on ours, really, SDG 6. Whereas actually multi-sectoral development is required for achieving success in the sanitation sector. So what would be a better way to influence the government on multiple wings of government to be involved in the sanitation sector? And I would add to that, not necessarily our usual partners. Who would like to go first?
Okay, I can contribute something maybe from certainly WaterAid, and I know a number of others are really focusing on the link between sanitation and hygiene and health, to kind of, targeting a sector that maybe gets more attention and more resource, and more kind of focus on capacity and so on, as well as on education. Because I think, it is true that everybody sitting in their own little sector won't really achieve the changes. And I think that what we've been saying about toilets is not just about having a toilet. It's about self-respect. It's about dignity. It's about having your neighbours feel a bit jealous of your toilets. It's about what does it mean having sanitation and speaking to those different areas. So I think certainly WaterAid's had a lot of focus on and very much targeting the neonatal and reproductive health elements of sanitation. So how much difference does it make to infant mortality, for example, as and childbirth, and the experience of midwives and the experience of health centres supporting women to give birth, and the difference that it makes when they have access to water for hand washing and proper sanitation and proper disposal of waste. And I think that's been really successful in terms of bringing in new commitment from politicians and from local authorities, because they see this as something that this is really on their radar already. And often if sanitation hygiene has been very poor and people have got used to a very low standard, then they don't kind of realise what difference it makes. So then having something really different and better to demonstrate what difference it makes, hopefully that can really trigger a big change sort of in the local level administrators, amongst the professionals, the unions, and the kind of influential stakeholders, as well as amongst families and communities. So that's another way of really bringing in different sectors, I think.
Thanks. Sarah, is your comment related to this?
No, it's a different question.
Okay. I was just going to say, put it out there to the whole group, really.
Sure.
Cecilia just wrote, what leverage do we have to support local government to potentially leverage these, to commit financially when they've got limited resources? We'll go to Sarah's question, but if anyone has examples of where they've successfully achieved this, even on a small scale, it would be really great if you could share it in the comments box. Thanks very much. Shoot, Sarah.
Yeah, so I'm a researcher at the Stockholm Environment Institute, and I work on some different issues relating to water and sanitation, particularly sanitation sustainability in Burkina Faso. And as a researcher, we're often told that our research needs to have impact. And so my question for the panel is, how do you measure that you've had an influence, and that you've engaged government? Is there a way that you can tell that you've had some kind of impact? And the second part of the question is, how do you continue to have that impact and continue that engagement when government shuffles around and the people that you were working with change? things change over, which can happen fairly often in government. So how do you deal with that to continue having that influence?
Akramul, do you want to, can I volunteer you to start off?
I'm just touching on that. And the first one is Mohit's question. So one of the issues that is particularly what really we really need to do in SDG. So we need to have both in publics and the governments, the states. We both need to be more responsive in terms of the sanitations. In terms of when you see the public sector's responsibility, and this is coming in a bigger way in terms of the public facilities, because as far as Bangladesh, a lot of public facilities doesn't have a good quality of sanitation practice. So that comes in a big way. So state has to a lot of attention on that, and sometimes it just should also continue to give financing for the extreme poor. Those are really important for us in terms of for the rights issue. So this is really a state. So we need to work together for that state responsibility. But in others, the people as a whole, we also need to have our own responsibility to perform. And in that case, we need to improve our own sanitation system where we can, and improve our own behavior. So that's one of the issues that we need to really need to work together on that, and at the same level with all platforms or NGOs have to be on that direction. The next question is what I'm asking, the impact. How do we measure the impacts? It's basically depend on what you are going to invest on the policy engagement. As for our example, when I was just spoken in a few minutes back, where we have an interaction with the local government for selecting the extreme poor and then funding of the government funds to them. That was really useful because we did our own exercise by the villagers, and we placed this list to the government. But at the same time, we said, okay, if you fund this 50%, we can also give a matching fund. That's really a kind of a winning situation, but also have a clear list and clear impact. So you can see the numbers, and you can see the reality in the ground that people have. So it depends on what you are going to engage. Maybe if you have a policy engagement, then you could have an impact on the changes of any policies. But if you look maybe on the practice engagement, there's different types of indicators that you will look to be.
Thanks. And also,
thanks.
Sorry. Yeah. And also, Jack, obviously you're working at the global level. How would you begin to think about impact? Do you have any chance of measuring or monitoring impact of the work that you do at such a global level?
So, as a movement, it's difficult to attribute total impact to us. And that's also one of the reasons we're still not very rich. But the important thing is not, because we don't have to account to a lot of donors, because we don't have them, we are able to be very free to look at where are the gaps that all the other stakeholders are not playing on. So typically, if you are a direct service provider, then the impact measurement will be very accurate because it's number of toilets built, how many are still functioning, and the number of people enjoying it, and maybe even the illness, disease control in a particular area. If you are a movement, it is like you create a religion and everybody build the churches, and the pastor in each church controls the flock, but you control nothing. But it's very, very important to continue to have a funny guy in the entire landscape. So it's very risky for all these important people to be funny, because being funny requires you to be laughed upon. So when you want to measure the entirety, it is almost impossible. But we could say that the subject of toilet has transformed from a taboo into a fashionable agenda. We can see that through the effort of everybody, the sanitation has decoupled from water and has got its own distinct agenda in the development sector now. We could see that the media coverage is tremendous, and we could see that the public policy of building toilets right now is very, very fast paced. So from India, 110 million toilets, how many it will still be not used as toilets, the other part we have to do. I don't think it will be done within this term of Prime Minister Modi, maybe a second and a third term, or this project will be probably done in India by 10-15 years. When I was in Bangladesh with Akramul Islam, I asked them how long does the behavioral change happen. They say about 12 years. So actually it's quite long. Yeah, you don't actually suddenly put a toilet and everything is all right. So inside India, if it starts to change, in Africa there is still a lot of work. In Latin America, in Southeast Asia, but the trend is that things are getting better and better. And from there, you have to think about how to augment this process through other indirect non-sanitation work like livelihood and income generation. And if they can earn more money, then the toilet gets better and better. The thing about toilet is it gets better forever. Even the toilet in our own house now, we would renovate it once a while to make it better and improve the tiles and the faucet and water saving shower and whatever. So it never ends.
Hi, can I just add something as well? Yeah, so I think that, I mean, the thing about sanitation as well is that, of course, it's not just you know, the fecal sludge management and the safe disposal of the waste, and that's often the bit that people are not so, that is maybe harder to kind of get good attention for in the long run, because it's not just the you know, politicians want to see results in the short term, so having lots of toilets is a really good target, but really seeing more money spent on sort of the systems and the services and the processes that go behind ensuring sanitation is available for everybody, but also that it's safely managed. And of course the Sustainable Development Goals really put the focus on that. So I think there's, again, that's another challenge, and the way to monitor that has to be looking at budgets and budget tracking to see, is there more money being spent on some of this disposal and so on. And I'm sure, Sarah, you're very aware of the shit flow diagrams as well. It's a really, I think, I'm not an expert at all in this, but I can see that it's something that's really gaining traction as a way of highlighting what's happening in terms of the disposal, the containment disposal, the containment, transport, disposal and reuse of the waste, and actually tracking that in various cities and urban areas. And I think that's and gathering ways of getting the data and showing that very graphically as something that can be monitored.
Louisa, I wanted to ask, have you set up any sort of monitoring yet with for your human rights work, given that you're directly trying to influence government?
Well, when it's it's obviously quite a difficult thing to monitor, but I mean, we are looking at things. We've sort of identified various kind of general domains to look at change. So to look at our communities, our especially more excluded communities, are they more aware of what their rights are and the services that they're entitled to, and are they able to engage more in space, in, you know, there are, most local governments have engagement opportunities for local planning for community-based people spaces. That's one thing, and the other thing would be, you know, what responsiveness is there on behalf of governments? Are they putting more budget into or more attention to the people who don't have services? So, but beyond the sort of those general domains, both in terms of people demanding their better services more actively, and then also governments feeling more responsible and being more responsive, then there are very sort of context-specific milestones. So we've got some examples, for example, some work in Bangladesh where they set milestones for what it would look like if people are more are getting better response, a better, more effective relationship between the communities and the local government in terms of the services. And I could share those, that some of them are written up in a paper that was presented at the Rural Water Supply Network Forum in Abidjan. But we're kind of trying to work on that, I guess. But of course the other thing is it's very difficult to attribute these changes to some particular input, because there are so many things that influence people, you know, as Jack has said, you know, having huge media input is one thing, having more focus on, it may be a change in policy at the policy level driven by something completely different that has actually caused a big change in investment and so on, but still trying to kind of see that particular sense of demand and responsiveness is something that we're working on. Yeah. I think that's as far as I can go at the moment. I'm sure others might be able to add something.
No, it's great, thanks. It'd be wonderful to hear when you do get some ideas going. Even if they don't work, it gives us all a starting point of what not to try. So yeah, good luck with it. Not an easy task by any means. So the question, we've got another question in the box, which is, should local government exercise the principle of eminent domain to acquire land for sanitation infrastructure? And what's been the experience around this?
Could you repeat the question? I was putting in a link.
Should local government exercise the principle of eminent domain to acquire land for sanitation infrastructure? I guess this is it's certainly something I came across when I worked in Rwanda, was that one thing that the government felt they could do was give us land, even if they couldn't give us financial resources. Where or how that land came to be is a slightly different question. So I'm not sure if you have any experiences of that, or if this is a question we'll need to put onto the SuSanA forum for further discussion.
I would love to hand that question to Mueed, who's on the call from Bangladesh, who has experience in Bangladesh of doing that and acquiring the land, because I know it's an interesting story about you know, how to working with the government to get the land, but then also working with the communities to accept the use of the land for the treatment of fecal waste, because obviously there was a huge amount of concern about that locally, and the kind of the different negotiations and the different discussions that they had in order to get the land from the farmers and so on. I don't know if Mueed is able to take the microphone if he's still on the call. And Mueed, would you like to answer that question?
Should I respond maybe one of your questions, particularly the land issue for Bangladesh?
Yeah, I think that would be great, Akramul, if you could do that.
Yeah, so we just had an agreement with the one municipality, but the government municipality has their own land. So, and they built basically a plant earlier, but this was not functioning. So we made an agreement with them, so we made it functional, and then also moved to the organic fertilizer. So as for till now, the places we don't find any problem with the communities, because it's quite a open place, and then doesn't have a big trouble with this local community. They were used to past, but didn't always make it function. But I understand the concern, and particularly for Bangladesh is the most density country, and then it's really having a trouble of carrying the materials and then putting on that in the dump. But in the place that we're working, we're pretty open, and we don't have find any problem to bring this fecal slushes in the treatment plant. So that is fine for this. But it's important that finding land is really difficult, and then without the municipality support, you will not get it actually. And then even get support the land, you also need to get support from the local community that they can use it. So you need to build a partnership with the local government.
Great. Well, we've approached, we're at 3:27 UK time, which is now very, very late for our colleagues in Bangladesh and Singapore. So I think I'd just like to say thank you very much. Thank you to SEI for hosting, as always. And I look forward to continuing these discussions. We've made a note of all the questions, and as Arne said, there is a recording, so hopefully you can prompt colleagues to listen again. And carry on the debate in your own team and countries. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to our presenters, Louisa, Akramul and Jack. And we look forward to following up with you and finding out how these great initiatives are continuing. All the best. Bye.